Canon has just launched a successor to the popular Powershot G10 in the shape of the, not surprisingly named, G11. What is a surprise though is that the pixel count has gone down from the 14 million pixels of the G10 to just 10 megapixels in the G11. The emphasis with the G11 is not on how many pixels it's got, but on its low light shooting ability. Now the new 10 megapixel CCD sensor in this camera, coupled with the Digic 4 processor, enables this camera to produce what Canon says is 2 stops better noise performance. So in other words, this camera at 800 ISO will give the same noise performance that the G10 gave at ISO 200, which if true is quite an impressive feat. In addition, this camera can shoot up to ISO 3200 in most of its modes, and there's a special low light mode which enables the camera to shoot at a reduced resolution of 2.5 megapixels at an ISO 12800, and it can do that for 2.5 frames per second or 2.4 frames per second. Another difference with the G11 is the return of the tilt and swivel LCD screen, which appeared on some earlier G-series cameras but disappeared in the later ones for some strange reason. Obviously, Canon has realised that people actually do quite like this feature, makes it certainly much more useful, and this particular camera has a 2.8-inch high-resolution 460,000 dot LCD screen, which is pretty clear and bright, and as I say, it pivots from the side and it can rotate freely at different angles, and it can also be turned in towards the body to protect when it's not in use. Now the G11 has a 5 times optical zoom going from 28 to 140 millimeter with a maximum aperture of f2.8 at the wide end, extending to f4.5 at the telephoto end. Other than that, the shape and styling and design of the camera is pretty familiar to G-series users. The top plate has the usual direct controls for exposure compensation using these direct metal dials here, the ISO, which as you see now is up to 3200, and the mode dial on the top there, which has program, shutter, aperture priority, manual, 2 custom functions. It has this low light mode here on the top, and it also has this quick shot mode, which is a mode taken from the Canon Ixus range of cameras, which enables you to get quick shots, as the name implies, with minimal shutter lag. There's also, of course, the scene modes and the movie mode. Now, despite the presence of an HDMI port on the side, this does not shoot HD movies, just VGA movies. So on the back, this rotating dial control is pretty quick and intuitive and really good to use for switching between different modes and options. Here in the scene mode dial, we can switch very quickly just by scrolling between the scene modes here, the subject modes. If you go into, say, for example, shutter priority, you get the display of shutter speeds, and you can see the window down at the bottom there, where you can just scroll very easily between the shutter speeds. It's quite a quick and intuitive system. There we go, in aperture priority. It becomes an aperture display along the bottom. The menu is very clear, it's nice to use as well, nice and colourful, very bright. It's quite easy to see what you want to, where you want to get to, and you can scroll through very easily. And there's also, of course, you've got the 4-way controller for selecting as well if you want to use that. Now, there are plenty of focusing options with this camera. In addition to having 9 AF points plus face detection, you have the ability to manually select an AF point using the FlexiZone AF system. You've got manual focusing on this camera and focus bracketing on this camera as well, and it will focus to within 1 centimeter of the lens in macro mode. This is, of course, a system camera like its predecessor, and there are a couple of options here. There's a hot shoe, of course, for external flash, and there's a little shoe here, a little ring you can undo here to attach a extension tube or macro flash attachment. Overall, this is a very impressive looking camera, which is relatively small, and it offers most of the functions of a DSLR, including things like RAW shooting and compatibility with Canon's DPP software. It's also an acknowledgement that perhaps the pixel race is over, really, because they've actually reduced by a third the number of pixels, almost a third, over their previous camera, and are basically saying, well, 10 megapixels is enough. What we want to do now is to give you better quality pictures in low light, and this is something that the G11 is striving to do, and I think perhaps this is a nail in the coffin of the more pixels is better mentality. It's also a return to the LCD tilt and swivel screen, which was dropped strangely and has now been brought back to acknowledgement that, again, functionality is playing a big part in the thinking behind the new G series camera. So the Canon Powershot G11 will be available in early October at a recommended price in the UK of £569.